In this video, we're going to look at the recent downturn in global growth momentum and consider some of the implications for growth in general and also some asset classes. So the chart here, we're looking at the blue bars left-hand scale is our measure of growth momentum at the G4. So that includes US, Japan, Europe, and China. And so we're looking at the change or the most recent observation of whether it be an ISM or a PMI or some equivalent relative to the average of the past 12 months. And typically when it's turned negative, and it did so in February after going flat in January, typically when it does turn negative, what we've seen is the annual growth rates in industrial production begin to roll over. And so it begs the question, have we seen the very best in global growth, which the red line shows on the right-hand scale? It's been running at around about 4, a little bit over 4% now for the past 4 or 5 months. So is it an early indication of a downturn in activity? So just have a closer look at that now on the chart of industrial production growth. Globally, you can see the recent growth rates are around about 4%. The pink dots represent the periods where, or the points at which G4 growth momentum has gone through the zero level, as it did during the January-February period. So it has been associated with peaks, as you can see here in industrial production. There's been a couple of one or two sort of false signals along the way, back in 2006, 2007. But generally, it's provided at least some sort of clue of an imminent downturn in global growth rates. What about for the US 10-year? So we go back here and we can see that it has often coincided with a peak in, or a near-term peak in bond yields, certainly back in the early 90s as we work our way through to the 2000s. Obviously missed the peak in 2010-11 and occurred near the trough here, but more often than not, it's been associated as well with a peak in bond yields. And if we express the chart in terms of a whole range of occurrences going from month 0 out to month 9 to month 12, these are basis points. So on average, the US bond, there we go, the US bond has fallen, that's the bold red line, by around about 60 basis points in the 6 months post G4 momentum pushing down through the zero level. So a couple of possibilities are emerging. One is that we've seen the very best in global growth. Secondly, that it suggests that the upward pressure on bond yields is going to diminish. Now, we should also say that a reason, or one of the reasons for the downturn in the G4 growth momentum series was the sharp drop in the official Chinese PMI, which was affected by the Lunar New Year. So we'll have to wait and see whether there's some seasonal factors taking that lower. But in any case, if we exclude the Chinese numbers, the G3 has been turning down, probably reaching levels of around about 0. What we're looking at now is the chart once again showing G4 growth momentum, and there's the dip below 0 just in the past month, and the blue bars represent 3-month returns from global equities. And so as we can see here very broadly that typically weak growth momentum below 0, and particularly when it's declining, has been associated with poor equity market returns. Let's have a closer look at that when we put in place a filter on G4 growth momentum. So we're looking at periods where G4 growth momentum is less than 0. We're going to consider the performance of global equities. I'll choose that particular one. So we're looking at MSCI World ex Australia net index in US dollars. These are, we can do monthly returns. Monthly returns when G4 growth momentum is below 0 have been on average 0.25% versus other periods, that is when momentum's above 0, returns have been 1.1%. So we can quickly have a look at what this sort of period has meant for other equity markets. And what we could show here, we can rank them by T-stat. So what we find is towards the top, these are the asset classes, or the equity asset classes, that seem to have the strongest relationship with the downturn in growth momentum. So we immediately see small caps. So if we have a look at the small cap returns, you can see that when growth momentum has been below 0, small cap returns have been about 0.1% a month versus 1.72. Going to Japanese equities, as one might expect, tend to be negatively impacted by a downturn in growth momentum with returns of minus 0.5 versus 0.9. That's the distribution of those monthly returns below. And emerging markets also rank fairly highly in terms of a negative outcome, as you can see there, negative 0.3 over a 1 month period, as opposed to almost 1.5 when growth momentum is positive. So the recent data, early as it is to draw conclusions, but does suggest that there is a risk that we've seen the very best in growth. And if that is the case, then some of the asset classes that would be typically impacted will be small caps, Japanese and emerging market equities. Thank you.